Donald Trump's longtime driver is suing him for years of unpaid overtime. But this isn't just about back pay. It's about what happens when someone who has been invisible for decades decides he's had enough of silence. For 25 years, one man sat behind the wheel, watching, listening, keeping his thoughts to himself. Now, at 66, Noel Cintron is ready to speak, and what he has to say could challenge everything we thought we knew about Donald Trump. Cintron wasn't only a driver, he was a shadow, a silent witness to calls that never reached the press, deals that shaped an empire, and private moments hidden from the spotlight. For more than 2 decades, he guided Trump through Manhattan streets in sleek Cadillacs and limousines. Being a chauffeur at that level was never just about knowing the traffic shortcuts. It meant knowing how to vanish while still being completely alert. Every day followed a ritual. The car was prepped before sunrise, engine humming, paint gleaming. The moment Trump slid into the back seat, Cintron could sense the kind of day it would be. Some mornings, silence filled the cabin, the weight of Trump's thoughts unspoken. Other times, the car became a rolling command center, filled with phone calls that brokered multi-million-dollar deals before the first traffic light. What most people don't realize is that drivers like Cintron become living record books. Day after day, year after year, they see patterns unfold. They witness the same allies and adversaries come and go. They watch fortunes rise and collapse, and they see how their boss reacts when no audience is around. The unspoken rule of the trade is absolute. Notice everything, remember nothing, repeat less than nothing. Cintron mastered that unwritten code better than most. He became part of the background, present but invisible, loyal without question. But now the silence has cracked, and when someone who's seen it all decides to speak, the fallout could be explosive, not just for the man he served, but for the image of power itself. He could sense Trump's mood before Trump himself realized what kind of day it would be. Through the 90s, Cintron watched him juggle casinos and real estate empires. By the early 2000s, reality TV had turned Trump into a household name, adding a whole new layer of pressure. Each chapter brought different types of rides, different conversations, and different expectations. Yet through it all, Cintron was there in the driver's seat, quietly absorbing everything. The job demanded sacrifice. Working 50 or more hours a week was just standard. Family trips had to be mapped out long in advance and could vanish instantly with one phone call. Medical checkups were delayed. Personal life was always second to the needs of his boss. But Cintron didn't complain. Not yet. This was the bargain. Serving someone that powerful meant centering your entire existence around theirs. The paycheck was solid. The position carried status. And above all, Trump trusted him. In that world, trust was worth everything. Then came the turning point. When Trump announced his run for president, Cintron knew the ground beneath him was about to shift. Politics doesn't just change the individual running, it changes everyone within their orbit. What had once been private chatter became matters of national consequence. Simple drives turned into motorcades with federal agents. The Secret Service stepped in, and Cintron was quietly pushed aside. There was no handshake, no farewell, no recognition of decades spent at the wheel. One moment he was indispensable, the next forgotten. But those years of sitting in silence had left him with something valuable: perspective. And perspective doesn't vanish when a job ends. Most drivers in his position would have walked away, signed the papers, and lived out retirement in peace. That would have been the safe choice. Staying silent would have been smarter. Speaking out against Trump came with heavy risks. But something gnawed at him. Maybe it was the cold way his service ended. Maybe it was the years of watching how ordinary people were brushed aside while the powerful walked free. Or maybe the weight of a quarter-century of silence simply became too much to carry. By 2018, the burden was unbearable. And when Cintron finally broke his silence, he didn't do it quietly. He filed a lawsuit that dragged Trump's treatment of employees into the open and exposed patterns that had been hidden in plain sight for decades. When Cintron's lawyers submitted their 47-page complaint in a Manhattan court, it landed like a thunderclap in Trump's orbit. This wasn't some ex-employee angling for a quick settlement. It was a meticulous, fact-filled account spanning decades, outlining employment practices that painted a troubling picture, and the numbers were impossible to ignore. For over 25 years, Cintron worked roughly 55 hours a week, consistently exceeding the standard 40-hour threshold. By law, those additional 15 hours should have been compensated at time-and-a-half rates. Over just a 6-year period, that added up to more than 3,300 hours of unpaid overtime. Then came the twist that stung the most. In 2010, the Trump Organization handed Cintron what looked like a raise, bumping his salary from $68,000 to $75,000 a year. On paper, it seemed like recognition. But there was a catch. To receive that $7,000 increase, he had to give up his health insurance benefits, which were worth around $18,000 annually. The math was brutal. Instead of gaining, he effectively lost $11,000 every year under the guise of a promotion. Think about it. This was someone who had dedicated decades to Trump, who knew his routines and movements better than most members of his inner circle. And this was the reward for that loyalty. Cintron's complaint wasn't just emotional outrage. It was backed by hard evidence. His detailed records documented early morning pickups, late-night drop-offs, weekends sacrificed, and holidays spent on the job. His logs told a story that clashed directly with the narrative presented by Trump's company. What set this case apart was not just the evidence, but also the timing and the resolve. Most employees file complaints quickly, once they realize they're being shortchanged. Cintron stayed quiet until the very edge of New York's 6-year statute of limitations, suggesting he had spent years trying to resolve matters privately before resigning himself to legal action. The Trump Organization's defense strategy followed a familiar script. Rather than directly addressing the financial details, they went after Cintron's credibility, portraying him as a bitter former worker chasing money. But wage laws don't bend to loyalty or reputation. They exist to protect employees from exploitation, and if those protections were violated, personal attacks wouldn't erase the claims. And here's the part that struck deeper. Cintron's story wasn't isolated. His lawsuit cracked open a window into a wider pattern across Trump's businesses. From Atlantic City casinos to Manhattan hotels, from construction crews to Mar-a-Lago staff, similar stories surfaced. Complaints about pay, treatment, and fairness that echoed across decades. Housekeepers at Trump hotels noticed overtime hours mysteriously vanishing from their timesheets. Restaurant staff saw their schedules shifted around in ways that stripped them of benefits. None of it was coincidence. It was a system. The construction side of Trump's empire revealed an even harsher reality. Contractors who built Trump's properties, electricians, plumbers, carpenters, often had to sue just to receive their basic pay. Crews would finish the job only to be dragged into lawsuits that could stretch on for months, even years. Some local businesses grew so wary they refused to take on Trump projects unless they were paid up front. What's even more telling is how the legal community adapted. In New York and New Jersey, law firms began specializing in cases against Trump. They had seen the pattern repeat too many times. Workers were promised improvements only to discover hidden trade-offs buried in paperwork. Hours quietly disappeared from official records. Complaints led to fewer shifts or sudden firings. For people in roles like Cintron's, drivers, bodyguards, personal aides, the pressure wasn't just financial, it was personal. These weren't employees in the background. They were insiders with access to private conversations and delicate moments. That access came with a silent agreement: stay quiet or face consequences far beyond losing a paycheck. Even staffing agencies caught on. Some began warning temporary workers before sending them to Trump properties. Others, stopped working with Trump altogether after dealing with too many disputes and frustrated employees. At Mar-a-Lago, the same issues played out. Kitchen teams and maintenance staff worked long days without proper overtime. Final checks often came with unexplained deductions that left wages falling below minimum standards. The most troubling aspect of these practices was how they exploited the most vulnerable. Undocumented workers feared retaliation if they challenged payroll abuses. Language barriers kept many from fully understanding their rights. And when someone did try to push back, they were often forced into non-disclosure agreements that locked them into silence. Then comes the revelation that takes Cintron's story into far more explosive territory: the Epstein connection. As Trump's driver, Cintron wasn't just handling traffic routes, he was present during some of the most controversial chapters of Trump's social life. In the 90s and early 2000s, Jeffrey Epstein wasn't yet infamous. He was a wealthy financier who regularly appeared at Mar-a-Lago events and exclusive gatherings. He moved freely within Trump's circle. Every one of those meetings required arrangements. Someone had to coordinate transport, log the trips, and be present at every unscheduled stop. That someone was often Cintron. Professional drivers are meticulous record keepers, maintaining logs for tax purposes and company records. Which means that when it came to Trump's association with Epstein, Cintron wasn't on the sidelines. He was sitting in the front seat. Those logs could reveal where Trump went, who he met with, and how often. When federal investigators began scrutinizing Jeffrey Epstein's network in 2019, they weren't just examining phone records and flight manifests. They wanted to know who made those connections possible, who arranged the introductions, coordinated the movements, and handled the details that kept those relationships alive. Cintron's role placed him directly in the center of that world. He was behind the wheel during the years when Trump and Epstein's ties were at their strongest. Publicly, Trump shifted his stance, from describing Epstein as a friend to later downplaying their relationship. But Cintron's meticulous logs could reveal a much different story. Investigators knew that staff members like drivers, bodyguards, and assistants often held the missing pieces. They weren't the decision-makers, but they saw everything. They managed the schedules, witnessed the private exchanges, and kept track of the daily flow. Cintron's situation was especially significant because, unlike many Trump employees bound by ironclad non-disclosure agreements, he had the freedom to speak. His timing, combined with the way his employment ended, gave him a unique chance to share what he knew. Meanwhile, as Cintron pursued his legal fight, tremors were beginning to ripple through the Republican establishment. The party that had rallied around Trump was starting to show unease. By 2019, high-ranking Republicans were no longer speaking with the same confidence behind closed doors. Some questioned how much damage the constant scandals could inflict. Strategists began to draw up contingency plans just in case. On Capitol Hill, the shift was noticeable if subtle. Lawmakers who once received frequent calls from Trump saw the line go quiet. Routine planning sessions evaporated. Even Trump's most devoted allies felt themselves being edged out of his inner circle. The upcoming campaign lacked the precision and energy that defined 2016. Fundraising teams quietly looked at other opportunities. Digital strategists who once fueled Trump's dominance online started lending their expertise to Senate and governor's races. Internal polling began delivering sobering results, hinting at vulnerabilities no one in Trump's orbit wanted to acknowledge. Voters in key battleground states were beginning to show discomfort with Trump's growing list of personal scandals. Focus groups revealed a telling divide. People approved of his policies but were uneasy about his character and long history of questionable business practices. Even Republican governors began creating distance. Leaders who once shared the stage at rallies suddenly found scheduling conflicts when invitations arrived. They continued to support his platform, but made sure to steer clear of the controversies swirling around him. Conservative media voices adjusted their messaging as well. Instead of offering blanket defenses, they started drawing a line between backing Trump's policies and defending Trump himself. It was a subtle but deliberate shift, designed to prepare their audiences for a future where Trump might no longer be the face of the movement. The clearest signal came from campaign finance records. Wealthy donors who had previously bet everything on Trump began spreading their money across other candidates, hedging their bets as doubts about his future mounted. What gives Cintron's account its weight isn't only what he saw, but that he was willing to step forward when so many others stayed quiet. For a quarter century, he had a front-row seat to Trump's life, noticing patterns that most outsiders could never access. Unlike executives confined to boardrooms or aides focused on official duties, Cintron was present for the in-between moments, the phone calls taken on the road, the conversations between events, the flashes of frustration when plans unraveled. These unfiltered glimpses revealed more about Trump's character than any press conference or campaign speech. When Cintron launched his lawsuit in 2018, it wasn't simply a bid for unpaid wages. It was an attempt to expose long-standing employment practices that had been hidden in plain sight. His carefully kept records, meticulous notes of hours, benefits, and assignments, provided tangible evidence of systemic issues within the Trump organization. His legal team recognized the significance immediately. Here was a witness who could not be silenced by non-disclosure agreements, who had documentation to back his claims, and who stood as a voice for countless other workers who had endured similar treatment but never spoke up. What made his case even more important was how it connected to the larger pattern of Trump's legal troubles. While most investigations focused on financial fraud or political corruption, Cintron's story highlighted how those same behaviors trickled down to everyday employees. For labor investigators who had long suspected misconduct, his payroll files and benefit records were the missing proof they needed to examine whether the same patterns extended across Trump's entire business empire. The ripple effect was undeniable. Inspired by Cintron's decision to step forward, other former employees began contacting attorneys and investigators with stories of their own. What started as a single driver's claim over unpaid overtime quickly expanded into a broader look at decades of questionable labor practices. The impact has endured. Cintron's choice to break his silence has become symbolic of something much larger than one man's employment dispute. It's about the courage it takes to challenge power and the heavy toll of staying quiet in the face of wrongdoing. For countless workers across Trump's businesses, his lawsuit confirmed what many had suspected. They weren't alone. Cintron's thorough records showed that their struggles weren't isolated events, but part of a recurring system that spanned properties, roles, and years. The case also revealed how entrenched power structures keep uncomfortable truths hidden. Non-disclosure agreements, intimidation, and financial leverage had long succeeded in keeping most potential whistleblowers quiet. Cintron's circumstances were different. Without an NDA restricting him, armed with years of documentation, and with little left to lose, he had the freedom others lacked. Legally, his case provided a foundation for broader inquiries. His logs offered investigators a roadmap into Trump's business operations. Labor lawyers gained new benchmarks for spotting patterns in other disputes. Regulators finally had concrete evidence of practices that could be pursued. But perhaps the most important takeaway from Cintron's story is the reminder of who really sees behind the curtain. It's not the executives in boardrooms, but the drivers, housekeepers, and personal aides who witness the raw, unfiltered reality every day. They see the distance between image and truth. And sometimes, after carrying those observations for years, they decide that telling the truth matters more than keeping the secret. As Trump's story continues to unfold on the national stage, attention has also shifted toward his family. Barron Trump, once shielded from public life, has begun to emerge. He made a rare appearance at a campaign rally, later standing with his father during the 2024 victory speech, where Donald Trump thanked all his children. With Trump returning to the White House, the question remains, will Barron continue to live quietly in the background, or step into a more public role? Now in his late teens, Barron has remained far less visible than his older siblings, afforded a degree of privacy unusual for the child of a former president. Yet the family's unique position at the center of American politics makes his future role a subject of growing curiosity. With his father back in the White House, the question lingers. Will Barron Trump step further into the public eye, or will he continue to live mostly outside the media spotlight? Some observers believe he may eventually embrace a more visible role, perhaps working behind the scenes in philanthropy or public relations as he grows older. Others think he'll focus on his own interests, whether sports, academics, or another path, and avoid the political limelight entirely. Whatever direction he chooses, it will likely reflect both his parents' protective instincts and the evolving weight of the Trump family legacy. Barron's story began not long after Donald and Melania's 2005 marriage. To the public, Melania is often seen as the polished, quietly elegant figure at her husband's side. But she is more than a supporting character in Trump's world of business and politics. When the couple discovered they were expecting their first child together, the news initially caught Donald off guard. Melania recalled that he needed a moment to process it before becoming enthusiastic. Though he had always envisioned children with her, the timing surprised him. Their son arrived in March 2006. Donald chose not to be in the delivery room, believing it would make things easier for his wife. The birth went smoothly, and both parents were overjoyed to welcome their child. The name Barron had been one of Donald's longtime favorites, though he had never used it for his older sons. Melania loved it immediately and had already been calling the baby Barron throughout her pregnancy. Even when Donald briefly reconsidered, she stood firm, insisting the name remain. That early disagreement over his name was just the beginning of many parenting choices they would face together. Their different approaches inevitably shaped how Barron was raised. One of the earliest and most important decisions concerned his education. From the start, the couple placed a strong emphasis on academics, enrolling him in one of New York City's most prestigious schools, Columbia Grammar and Preparatory School on the Upper West Side. When Donald Trump took the oath of office in 2017, Barron remained in New York long enough to finish his school year before beginning a new chapter in Washington, D.C. He made one of his last trips with his classmates especially memorable, inviting his entire fifth-grade class of about 80 students to visit the Capitol. The group toured the White House, met the president, explored the city, and even spent the night at a hotel before heading back to New York. Later that spring, the family revealed that Barron would attend St. Andrew's Episcopal School in Potomac, Maryland. Moving from Manhattan to the suburbs marked a dramatic change in his daily life. Tuition at St. Andrews cost around $40,000 a year, placing him on an educational path distinct from those of other presidential children. Unlike the Obamas, Bushes, and Clintons who sent their kids to Sidwell Friends, Barron followed a different route. After Trump left office in 2021, Barron's schooling continued in Florida. He enrolled at Oxbridge Academy in Palm Beach, where he graduated with the class of 2024. At first, he had resisted leaving New York. Just 9 years old at the time, he had strong friendships and loved his school. His father reassured him that the move would give him an opportunity to help other kids, which made the transition easier for him to accept. By the time of Trump's second presidency, things looked different. Barron had moved back to New York City, enrolling at New York University, one of the country's most prominent and often debated institutions. While studying there, he lived at Trump Tower, though Melania ensured he always had a room waiting at the White House whenever he wanted to visit. Like many children of political families, Barron had to learn how to navigate the divide between personal privacy and public life. His mother played a key role in shaping that balance. Melania has long emphasized that her parenting philosophy is rooted in guidance during childhood, while ultimately allowing her son to make his own choices as he steps into adulthood. With Barron, Melania has always respected his choices about his future and the life he wants to build. During his father's presidency, Barron faced unique challenges, particularly online. Chelsea Clinton, who had endured similar scrutiny growing up in the White House, often defended him publicly. She urged people to allow him the privacy to grow up without unfair judgment, condemning negative stories and reminding critics that he deserved a childhood free from constant media attention. Jenna Bush Hager also came to his defense, stressing an important truth. Barron never asked for this spotlight. He didn't choose for his father to become president, yet he became a target simply because of his last name. Having lived through the same pressures themselves, both Chelsea and Jenna understood the heavy burden of being a president's child and called on the public to leave him in peace. Their support underscored how difficult and unusual it is to grow up within the White House bubble. For Melania, privacy has always been a priority, first during her modeling career and later as First Lady. When asked if she could picture herself in the role, she once explained she would be very traditional like Jackie Kennedy, focusing on supporting her husband and fulfilling social duties. After the family left Washington in 2021, Melania largely withdrew from the spotlight, devoting her energy to raising Barron. She has never sought a wide social circle, preferring family over networking. Even at Mar-a-Lago, where many know her, she maintains a reserved presence, polite but distant. Her priority has always been her son's well-being. Her parents also played a strong role in Barron's upbringing, though her mother, Amalia, sadly passed away in 2020. Those close to the family noticed that Melania's focus never wavered. Her life revolved around caring for her son. Over the years, Barron has developed into a quiet, private young man, much like his mother. While Melania occasionally engages in charity work, her greatest dedication is to her family. She ensures that home life runs smoothly and that Barron grows up with stability. Her emphasis on privacy has clearly shaped his reserved personality. Before becoming First Lady once again in 2025, Melania had already served in that role from 2017 to 2021 as the wife of President Donald Trump. Born in Slovenia, she built her early career as a model before stepping onto the world stage in Washington. Melania Trump holds a unique place in American history as the first naturalized U.S. citizen to become First Lady and only the second to be born outside the country after Louisa Adams. She is also just the second Catholic First Lady after Jackie Kennedy. Recent polls show her popularity on the rise, with a favorability rating climbing to 54% from 51% earlier in the year. In Washington, however, she remains something of a mystery. Unlike most modern First Ladies, Melania is intensely private. Recognized globally as one of the most famous faces in the world, she joins Frances Cleveland as the only other First Lady to serve 2 non-consecutive terms. Although she encouraged Donald Trump to pursue the presidency in 2016, she preferred to stay in the background of the campaign. Instead of taking the stage at frequent rallies, she offered quiet support through strategy and private calls. The campaign was not without controversy. Old modeling photographs resurfaced, and her Republican National Convention speech drew criticism for closely mirroring words spoken by Michelle Obama. As Election Day drew near, she stood by her husband through the storm surrounding the Access Hollywood tape. Transitioning from campaign advisor to First Lady brought even more attention, much of it unwanted. When Donald took office, Melania initially stayed in New York so Barron could finish the school year. During that time, she also finalized details of her prenuptial agreement. For the first several months, Donald's daughter Ivanka often stepped in to fulfill certain First Lady duties. Once Melania moved into the White House, she continued to keep a lower profile than many of her predecessors, spending more time in the family's private residence and hosting fewer events. Her tenure as First Lady wasn't without challenges. In 2018, she faced rumors about her husband's alleged affairs. Melania publicly dismissed them, saying no one had ever spoken to her about such matters and attributing the stories to political opponents. That same year, she underwent kidney surgery for what doctors described as a benign condition. She also made a high-profile trip to Africa, which sparked debate over her wardrobe choices and messaging. Despite the controversies, she kept her focus on her main priority, children's welfare. She launched the Be Best initiative, championing causes related to young people's health, safety, and online behavior. She also made regular visits to hospitals to spend time with children and their families. As First Lady, Melania walked a delicate line, balancing the heavy public responsibilities of the role with her determination to keep much of her life, and her sons, private. The constant media spotlight required Melania Trump to carefully balance her public role with her private responsibilities, all while promoting causes such as children's welfare and online safety. She maintained a more restrained presence than many of her predecessors, even as she launched the Be Best initiative, which focused on children's emotional and physical well-being. One of her biggest challenges was protecting her son Barron from excessive attention as he grew up in the White House. Barron was only 10 years old when his father became president, and until then, he had largely been shielded from public scrutiny despite his family's fame. Once the family moved into the White House, Melania worked tirelessly to keep his daily life as ordinary and private as possible. He rarely appeared in public, aside from occasional mentions by his father about how much he had grown. This privacy, however, fueled constant speculation and gossip about him. Some stories about Barron had elements of truth. For instance, he once wore Nike sneakers while his father criticized the company over its deal with Colin Kaepernick. But many other claims were entirely fabricated. False reports circulated online, including one alleging he had won a major science competition and another showing a doctored image of him wearing an Obama t-shirt. None of these stories were real, but they spread quickly, blurring the line between fact and fiction. For Barron, this environment made life even harder and pushed him toward avoiding the spotlight altogether. When Barron turned 18 in 2024, he became old enough to publicly speak for himself. Known to enjoy tennis, he was recently spotted taking lessons as he prepared for his next chapter in college. Still, rumors continued to follow him. Unlike his father, who grew more comfortable with fame over time, Barron never seemed at ease with public attention. During the rare occasions he appeared with his parents, he often looked uneasy, avoiding eye contact, appearing distracted, and rarely smiling. Observers quickly picked up on these behaviors, and speculation about his health spread online. One viral video suggested he might be on the autism spectrum, shared by a woman who noted similarities to her own daughter. She even argued that if true, the Trump family could use their platform to raise awareness about autism. However, she later deleted the post, and the family responded swiftly to shut down the rumors. Melania's legal team quickly intervened when a YouTube video speculated about Barron's health, demanding it be taken down and firmly rejecting claims that he might be autistic. They stressed that his behavior reflected nothing more than typical childhood mannerisms. The episode highlighted how a single social media post about a public figure can spiral into a legal matter almost overnight. Not long after, another round of false stories surfaced. In June 2024, a supporter claimed online that Barron had an IQ of 170, spoke multiple languages, and was a chess prodigy. The reality is far more ordinary. He does speak Slovenian, taught to him by his mother Melania, but there is no evidence that he is fluent in French, Italian, or German. As for the IQ claim, no such record exists, and given Donald Trump's tendency to praise his son's height and growth, it seems unlikely he would have overlooked bragging about a genius-level score. The rumor about chess mastery was also fabricated. It originated from a satirical article in the Daily Chronicle, which published a photo of Barron with a chessboard and falsely declared he had achieved Grandmaster status. The same piece even suggested Donald Trump learned chess from Bobby Fischer, a statement easily disproven. While a quick fact-check could have debunked the entire story, social media allowed the fiction to spread far faster than the truth. As the Trump family returned to the White House, the challenge of separating Barron's real life from the myths surrounding him grew more intense. Rumors multiplied, fueled by conspiracy theories that ranged from misleading to outright bizarre. One of the strangest claimed that Barron Trump was actually Steve Bannon from the future. According to fringe online communities, Barron had supposedly traveled back in time to help his father secure the presidency. The theory spiraled further, invoking Donald Trump's uncle, who allegedly had access to Nikola Tesla's hidden blueprints for a time machine. Believers claimed these plans were used to construct the device, allowing time travelers to glimpse a catastrophic future. To prevent disaster, they said, Barron supposedly returned to ensure Trump's rise to power. As far-fetched as it sounded, the narrative gained traction among certain corners of the internet. Adding to the intrigue was the rediscovery of two obscure novels by Ingersoll Lockwood, written in the late 19th century. The books, Barron Trump's Marvelous Underground Journey and The Last President, feature a young character named Barron Trump, who embarks on fantastical adventures alongside figures called Don F. and Princess Poofa. The uncanny similarities between fiction and reality fueled the imagination of conspiracy theorists who claimed the stories were prophetic. For some corners of the internet, the similarities between the old books and the Trump family are taken as evidence of time travel, fueling the belief that the stories were somehow predictions of their rise to power. These claims may entertain conspiracy enthusiasts, but they have no grounding in fact. What they do show, however, is how far the internet's imagination can go when it latches onto the lives of prominent families like the Trumps. As Barron continues to live mostly out of public view, his name remains woven into a mix of truth and fiction that thrives online. Reality may be far less dramatic than the theories, but it hasn't stopped the internet from turning his life into a source of endless speculation. Wild ideas about Barron and his family circulate constantly, keeping conspiracy-minded communities buzzing. Just when it seems every rumor has been exhausted, new ones emerge, fantastical, attention-grabbing, and often debated across forums and social media. From outlandish time travel claims to other sensational theories, these stories highlight the lengths people will go to create narratives around public figures. And when the subject is as high profile as the Trump family, the material is nearly limitless. Another compelling aspect of the Trump story is the wide age gap between Barron and his older half-siblings. This difference has shaped the way their relationships developed. Donald Jr., born in 1977, is nearly 3 decades older than Barron, who arrived in 2006. Ivanka and Eric are both more than 20 years older. And even Tiffany, the closest in age, was already a teenager when Barron was born. With such a generational divide, the older siblings often function less like traditional brothers and sisters and more like mentors or even extended family members. Their dynamic with Barron reflects this: protective, advisory, and shaped by their own adult experiences at the time of his childhood. While they were carving out careers, raising families, or stepping into the public spotlight, Barron was still navigating early childhood, reinforcing a relationship that felt more like guidance than equality. Even with the wide age gap, the Trump family still comes together for important milestones, and Barron's presence at these gatherings shows that distance in years doesn't always translate to emotional distance. Still, the difference in ages is something the media often points out, fueling speculation about how the siblings relate to one another in private. Unlike many families, the Trump children never grew up under the same roof. Donald Jr., Ivanka, and Eric were raised primarily by their mother, Ivana, while Tiffany lived with her mother, Marla Maples. Because of this, rumors have circulated that Barron isn't especially close to his older siblings. Yet their public appearances tell a different story. The family frequently gathers for events at the White House and Mar-a-Lago, and those moments often highlight the bonds between them. During Donald Trump's inauguration, for example, Ivanka was touched to see Barron playing peekaboo with her young son Theodore, calling him the baby whisperer on social media. Tiffany has also shown her affection for Barron. On his 14th birthday, she shared a family photo with a heartfelt message about how much he means to her. Like many blended modern families, the Trumps demonstrate that separate households and age differences don't necessarily weaken their ties. Yet alongside these glimpses of family connection, some of the strangest conspiracy theories have swirled around Barron's life. One of the most outlandish claims suggests that Princess Diana faked her death and is actually his biological mother. The rumor gained traction after an old interview of Diana resurfaced online, where she spoke about carrying out charity work privately. For conspiracy-minded followers, this was twisted into evidence that she had staged her own death. The theory quickly caught fire among communities eager for sensational narratives. Some QAnon supporters took it even further, alleging that Barron was secretly the child of Diana and Donald Trump. According to this claim, Diana didn't die in the tragic 1997 car crash, but instead went into hiding, later giving birth to Barron in 2006. This narrative imagined a world where the late Princess of Wales and the former U.S. president shared a child, an idea that, while baseless, captured the fascination of conspiracy theorists who thrive on blending fantasy with reality. Some conspiracy theorists went so far as to argue that if Barron were truly the son of Diana and Donald Trump, it would somehow make him the rightful heir to the British throne, a fantasy that attempted to merge royal succession with American politics. Of course, this idea has no basis in reality and ignores centuries of legal, cultural, and historical rules surrounding the monarchy. Still, that didn't stop the rumor from spreading online, particularly among those already inclined to believe fringe narratives. The claim generated plenty of debate in certain internet circles, driven almost entirely by speculation. Even though it was implausible from the start, it demonstrated how easily conspiracy theories can gain momentum in the digital era. People who buy into such notions are often searching for hidden links or secret backstories, no matter how far-fetched they may be. And with the way social media amplifies information, even the most absurd claims can go viral, sparking endless arguments and wild interpretations. While this particular story is pure fiction, it highlights the lengths some will go to create dramatic tales that blend intrigue, mystery, and fantasy. Looking at it logically, even if Diana had been alive when Barron was born in 2006, it makes little sense to imagine her secretly raising a child with Donald Trump, especially when she had been with Dodi Fayed at the time. Why would Melania raise a child that wasn't hers? And even if the scenario were true, Barron would have no path to the British throne, since Donald Trump has no royal bloodline. In reality, Barron's life is simply one of many examples of how children of famous families become targets of bizarre rumors and internet drama. Their every move can become exaggerated, distorted, or fabricated. It's a reminder of the unique pressures public figures' children face in today's media landscape. What are your thoughts on the challenges celebrity kids encounter when dealing with rumors and the relentless pace of social media? Share your perspective in the comments below. Thanks for tuning in.